U.S. Senator David Perdue says that the country, though, is in need of a major change, and he thinks Donald Trump can and will be the guy to do it. He joins us this morning from Washington. Senator Perdue, by the way, is also the former CEO of Reebok and Dollar General, so he's a man who knows his way around business. Senator, thank you for joining us today.
Good morning.
So we're looking at these new polls, and obviously polls have been up, polls have been down. Momentum seems to be flowing all over the place. But this latest poll that we've been talking about this morning does give a significant advantage to Hillary Clinton. Why is it that you think that this poll is picking up on the wrong things?
Well, let's look at the bigger picture. First of all, this same poll, the same people and the same methodology had me down 4 points. The national polls had me down 6 to 7 points going into our race, and we won by more than 8 points. So I don't put a lot of stock in the current polling because of a lot of reasons. First of all, we have a lot of new voters this time, and we have an unusual candidate. We have an outsider. And frankly, the polling industry, as well as the media, frankly, look at these candidates through the lens of the Washington bubble. So I'm not putting a lot of stock in these polls yet. And frankly, I think a lot's going to happen over the next few weeks as we move into the election and have these debates, too, by the way.
Let me first point out just the polls. It's kind of struck me as amusing to watch. Each camp on both sides of the spectrum on this, the Democrats and the Republicans, trash the polls, say that they're no good until the polls have them up, in which case they start touting the polls. So you're saying forget all the polls, right?
No, I'm just saying that you've got to take it with a grain of salt, frankly, because I think we're looking at Donald Trump through the lens of the Washington establishment, frankly. And these polls are not quite picking up, I think, what's out there. The intensity that you see behind a Donald Trump candidacy belies the unfavorables, the favorables, all the things the establishment use to evaluate a candidate going into the final weeks of a race. So what I see going on right now is these polls are not picking up a lot of the new voters. They're not picking up the intensity. And quite frankly, I think some people are not being as forthright with the pollsters as possibly they could be. So I think what you're seeing is a greater range of variability right now in these polls. And you're going to see that over the next few weeks. I would predict that Donald Trump's going to outperform these polls no matter what they say.
Senator, I'm curious, this is Gillian Tell of the Financial Times, and obviously this race being watched very closely around the world. If you had one or two key pieces of advice that you would give Donald Trump right now for how to keep building on this momentum, what would they be?
Well, I think to talk to people about the failures of the Obama administration and how Hillary Clinton is going to double down on these failed policies. But we have some examples around the world, too. I mean, the United Kingdom reduced their corporate tax rate in 2009 over 5 years from 28% to 18%. They got rid of their repatriation tax, and we now see London as a mecca for corporate headquarters. So I think these are the things that we ought to see him talking about. And he's beginning to do that. Look, his economic policy is a great first step to get the economy going again. And that's what people want to hear out there. People are hurting. I mean, between unemployed, underemployed, and people who have stopped looking for work, people are struggling getting from payday to payday. And his message is resonating in there.
But do you think that he's doing enough to reassure people who are worried about some of the inflammatory language? Because, you know, I speak to business leaders who say to me, well, yes, we like some of these points he's doing and talking about business, about taxation. Yes, we recognize that people are hungry for change. But some of that inflammatory language just makes me very scared.
Well, it should make you scared, but I'll tell you the other thing that should make you scared is the reality of our current situation. We have the weakest recovery in 70 years. We have fewer people working as a percentage of the workforce than any time since Jimmy Carter was president. You know, we have a GDP that's growing under 1% on a compound basis under this president. And maybe worst of all, in the last 7 years, we've let 4 million women have fallen into poverty. That's what we should be scared of, is the status quo, which is exactly what Hillary Clinton is promising us.
David, but can you just speak to the temperament issue? I mean, I have to imagine there are comments that he has made during this campaign that you would not be proud to say out of your mouth.
Well, look, he's a different person. I'm a different person. He's had a business career, though. Look at the stark contrast between these two candidates. On the one hand, we've got a person who's a derivative of the political bubble, who actually, in some cases, in my mind, thinks that she's above the law. And on the other side, you've got an outsider, a business guy, somebody that's been a fighter his entire career and, frankly, is listening to the people back home. So I think we've got a stark contrast of two individuals. And I'm really excited about what's going to happen over the next 7 weeks.
Senator, would
you
do business with Donald Trump?
I have, yes, absolutely I would.
You have and you did?
Yes. This is a guy that is in the real world. This is the thing that Washington misses. This is what I ran on. People who have been in Washington, have never been in the free enterprise system in the real world, have no clue what's involved in capital formation, taking risks, employing people, and creating jobs. That's
Do you think it was a mistake for Macy's to stop doing business with him?
I'm sorry?
Do you think it was a mistake for Macy's, for example, to stop? There's a list, dozens of companies that effectively stopped doing business with Donald Trump for a variety of reasons.
Well, Macy's was because they said because he was running for campaign.
Well, I think
that's
that's
part
right.
of it.
I think what you got to do is look at each individual situation. The bigger picture here, though,
someone was the inflammatory language. NBC Universal stopped doing business with him because of the inflammatory language.
Well, that's their decision. But I'm just telling you, if you want somebody to get this economy going, which is what people out there that I talk to running around the country really think that we've got to do. The other thing is they're really concerned about their own security. If you look at the national security situation, the two go hand in glove, by the way, guys, because of our debt situation. We're not able to really defend our country the way we need to right now. And I think Donald Trump is talking about getting the economy going and developing a long-term strategy to become responsible again financially.
Let's talk about the debt, because the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, this is the group, the bipartisan group that had been going around trying to get people to come to the table and deal with that, put out some new numbers overnight. They say, looking at the latest numbers that Clinton has released and looking at the latest numbers that Trump has released, they're now expecting that Clinton's plans would increase the debt by about $200 billion over a decade above the current law levels. They think Donald Trump's would increase the debt by about $5.3 trillion. Now, that's down from what they were expecting before. They've revised that from $11.5 trillion. But what do you think when you see numbers like that that are kind of assessed and tossed around?
Well, see, the media looks at numbers like that as absolute. I'm a business guy. I understand what happens when you adjust the tax rates, when you get after regulation, and then you unleash this energy boom, which are the three things that Donald Trump's talking about, what effect that will have on the economy. And that's a forecasting model that I'm not sure I agree with these people that are saying that's going to increase. We've seen
it's hard. I mean, granted, it is really hard when you try and look at dynamic scoring and say, I'm going to get 5.5% growth GDP, which is quite a bit higher than we've seen for a very long time. You're looking at the lowest GDP we've seen in years right now. Obviously, regulatory stripping away some of that would probably help. A lot of these things to unleash it, but it's really hard to come up with any sort of way to score the growth that you think you're going to get out of these things.
Of course it is. Remember when Ronald Reagan cut taxes in the 80s? Nobody in Washington thought that was a good idea, and it worked. So when I'm looking at the situation right now, we look around the world, we have the highest corporate tax rate, both nominal and effective tax rate in the world. We know we have to deal with that. We've got a lot of regulations right now that are sucking the very life out of our economy. We know we have to deal with that. What Hillary Clinton is talking about in her model is basically a continuation of these failed policies we've seen in the last 8 years. The last thing the business community wants to see, in my opinion, is a continuation of this over-regulated environment that, frankly, is shutting us down in terms of our competition with the rest of the world. And let me put out a warning here. We don't talk about this a lot, but China right now has a larger economy when you adjust for purchasing power parity than the United States. They're investing $300 billion in their military, which is on paper half of what we're spending, but when you adjust for purchasing power parity, they're about the same as we are. We're moving into a situation where China could do to us over the next decade what we did to the Soviet Union, and that is bankrupt them trying to defend their country. So I think we're in a very dangerous time right now, and I really want somebody in the White House who understands our free enterprise system and wants a different direction for our country.
Senator Perdue, thank you for your time today.